Hello everyone, this is part 19 of What If Naruto Was Trained by the Kyuubi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. I believe I need to explain some stuff when it comes to the reasons Naruto spared Kasumi. Since many of you assumed things that weren't true, and I think you should learn why he did what he did. Now for starters, you should realize that the moment Team Whirlpool met Naruto, he has been keeping an eye on them, from their words to their actions towards himself and other people. The reason for this being he was curious about them. The moment he found out they were brainwashed by Kushina, he wanted to know to what extent they were. Now of course he knew the kids would be very strict on what they were taught about him, so he knew that trying to verbally tell them Kushina was wrong would do nothing. However, he figured that his actions would speak louder than words. So he decided to do certain things completely contrary to what he was sure Kushina had taught them Kyuubi was like. In this case, saving Kasumi's life when he could have just watched her s. At this point in time he is experimenting with them, wondering if his actions will cause a seed of doubt to burn within him about Kushina's teachings. Now even if doubt is found or not, Naruto has no plans that far, he is simply curious as to what they will do. Because before meeting him the children only got one side of the story, so he simply wished to give his side of the story and see if they come to realize Kushina's idiocy. Perhaps he'll try to being siblings with them, perhaps he won't, nothing is for sure. Naruto is simply curious as to the children's reactions to his anti-Kyuubi actions. A good friend of mine I spoke about this with made an excellent point about this subject. Should the sins of the mother and her brainwashing be exacted on the children? No. If they choose to follow their mother down the path and attack Naruto, he should defend himself with lethal force if necessary. They should be given the opportunity to hear out of see Naruto's side of the story and let them make the choices who to believe. Here's something else for you. Propaganda only works when there is no opposing side to refute the propaganda. Naruto is a living, breathing contradiction to Kushina's propaganda. This is what I'm trying to get across with Naruto's actions with Kasumi. He wants to see if any of the children will question what the clan has taught them, or even ask him directly about it, or if they will simply remain blind sheep and continue to try king him without both sides of the same story told. Now on with the story. 1 month later. It's been exactly 1 full month since the preliminary matches of the Chunin exams concluded, and it was finally time for the final matches. Konoha was bustling with people from all over the elemental nations to lay witness to this year's Genin hopefuls. The crowds were even greater than usual because of just who would be fighting in the matches, many of the participants being of famous lineages and would promise to present matches that wouldn't soon be forgotten to those lucky enough to witness them in the large arena dedicated for this event. The arena itself was full to the brim with the audience that will witness today's events, all of them shouting to each other on just who would win against who. While many backdoor bets were made amongst those brave and rich enough to do so. Many prestigious people were there to witness the matches as well, including lords of the elemental nations, but most importantly 3 of Kages of the famous hidden villages, Hokage, Kazekage, and the Reikage. Hokage Dono, it's been a long time. The Kazekage greeted his face hidden by his ceremonial robes. That it has Kazekage Dono, please have a seat, you as well Reikage Dono. Sarutobi greeted, hiding his anger at both Orochimaru's gall at pretending to be the Kazekage, and from the Reikage's past actions against Konoha, more specifically the Hyuga clan. All 3 leaders sat, and began a rather strained conversation concerning the exams. So I've heard that the famous Uzumaki clan has decided to partake in this year's exams. The Kazekage questioned, sounding interested, making Sarutobi nod. Quote, ... I've also heard that the boy who was originally heir to that clan is participating as well. I wonder who would win if they fought. He mused, getting a slight glare from his sensei. In the end it won't matter, Kazekage Dono. The Reikage answered, making the other 2 leaders look at him questioningly. Because my shinobi will be the one left standing at the end of the exam. He elaborated smugly, a smirk gracing his lips. Because if she isn't, she will never see her Kar-san again. He mentally threatened, as if trying to send the message telepathically to Yugito. We'll see Reikage Dono, we'll see. However, Harkage Dono, I've noticed none of the participants around. Where are they? The Kazekage questioned. They are in the waiting room until it is time for the exams to start. It gives them time to mentally prepare themselves for their match without all of this noise. He said, making them all laugh. Differences aside, all three of them agreed it was far too noisy. Waiting room. In the waiting room, all but a select few of the participants lounged around, each in their own little area, mentally preparing themselves for their matches. No words were spoken, complete silence reigned throughout the room, a tenseness clearly evident to those who had cared to notice, while the others just sat oblivious, too concerned with their own matters. Finally, a turn of the doorknob seemed to knock everyone out of the tenseness, as Naruto and Natsumi walked in the room. The pair looked around the room, and expressed their salutations to the Sand siblings with a smile and nod, while just passing over others such as Valios. However, a certain candidate caught Naruto's eye and zoomed over to her, noticing she was staring at the floor. Yugito-chan, Naruto's boyish voice called out to the woman who seemed lost in thought. Yugito looked up at being called and warmly smiled, seeing her friends, more specifically Naruto. Hi Naruto-kun, Natsumi-san, she greeted, before gesturing for them to sit down on the couch she herself sat on. The two gladly sat and began to chit-chat quietly with her. However, Naruto noticed that during their conversation Yugito had begun to unconsciously rub the palms of her hands in a soothing motion. Yugito-chan, how are your hands? He asked in concern during a pause in the conversation. His question caught her off guard until she noticed what she had been doing and looked down in slight shame, as the memory of what had happened to her during the month hiatus flashed through her mind. Flashback. Damn it, these guys are relentless. A weary and severely beaten-looking Yugito huffed out, while she ran from two shadowy figures behind her, grasping her right arm in pain, trying to stop the wound from bleeding. These guys, they know I'm a Jinchuriki, but what the hell do they want from me? She questioned. I suppose it doesn't matter at the moment, all I need to do is get them cornered and then they are all mine. That old council room should be around here, that's my best bet. She concluded, remembering the mental blueprints of the old buildings she had been escaping through. It had only been 2 weeks since the preliminary matches had ended, and Yugito had just finished her daily training outside the borders of Kumo. She was heading back to rest up for the next day, when a pair of odd-looking men in black cloaks with red clouds appeared before her. There wasn't much of a conversation, they simply demanded she go with them. She refused, and after that all hell broke loose. She had no idea who these guys were, but after only a minute fighting them she knew they were no amateurs. Both of these men were oddities to her, each having strange but very powerful abilities. The first was a tan-skinned man with a bandana-like headband rest against a grey coif, that showed him as a new nin from the recently created hidden waterfall village. He had green pupil-less irises with the rest of the eye being red. He wore a black mask leaving only a small section of his cheeks and eyes visible. But the oddest thing were the 4 masks attached to his body. If the masks themselves weren't odd enough, the man was able to use an odd technique that allowed the masks to come off his body and actually come to life and even fight. Making it in reality a 6-on-1 fight, instead of 2-on-1. If the first man was strange, the second man took the cake. While looking more normal than the first man, in actuality he was far stranger. During their fight Yugito had been able to severely injure him, and yet he seemed to be unfazed. He explained that because of his zealot-like activism, his god, Jashin, favored him with immortality. His religious beliefs were later proven to be more than just bravado, when he used a technique in conjunction with large symbol on the ground and her own blood. While using this jutsu it changed his appearance, making his skin turn completely black with a white exoskeleton appearing over it. Once standing on the symbol, he used the large 3-bladed red scythe he lugged around slashed his own arm. And much to her surprise she felt the same injury he inflicted on himself. She quickly put the pieces together and figured out that he was able to injure whosever blood he consumed as long as he was within the symbol. She was able to get the man out of the symbol and cause its ruin before she was able to escape into nearby ruins. Yugito maneuvered through the building, and finally found herself in a large room that she was hoping to find. Perfect. There is only one way out of this room, you're both mine. She mentally thought, letting some of Izanami's chakra accelerate her healing. Where are you, kitty, kitty, kitty? The scythe-wielding man joked, as he and his partner casually walked through the building following the small trail of blood. Hidden, she is still a Jinchuriki, so don't let down your guard. And despite how much I would like to K you, I know Leader Sama would never allow it. The red-eyed man said in a gruff voice. Hidden waved off his warning. Ma, you worry too much, Kakazu. You need to use some of that money we get from bounties on other things than just the Akatsuki. Like, say, booze and hookers, perhaps. We can't squander our money on earthly pleasures. The two quieted down when they entered the council chambers, and looked around suspiciously, noting no other exits than the one they just came from. Neko-kan. Hidden cooed out in a way that could be considered lustful, though under the circumstances was decidedly anything but. However, his laid-back demeanor changed when the doors to the chambers behind them closed and locked. The pair turned around to see a feral-looking Yugito with purple wisps of chakra swirled around her violently. It's time for Kitty to play. Yugito taunted, as a feminine but powerful roar escaped her tea. The chakra around her glowed before engulfing the woman in its flames. The pair stepped back, noticing that Yugito began to grow and change. For the next minute the two looked on in curiosity, as Yugito began her transformation. Her cloths had quickly burned away, leaving her stark end for a few seconds before she fell down on all fours, with her bones beginning to crunch and break. However, they noticed that it wasn't in a negative nor painful fashion, since he wasn't screaming. Instead, the bones seemed to be breaking so that they could grow, and grow they did. By the time her transformation ended, Yugito was now a 3-story cat which looked like a ghost, the true form of the Nibi no Nekomata. Hidden whistled in astonishment. That's some transformation, however that puts us in a bind, Neko-chan. You see, we need you alive, and you transforming won't guarantee that. He explained as if it was nothing to him to K her. In truth it wasn't, he had ked hundreds of people in the past, what was one more? Even if he'd admit she had a body that put any he had seen previously to great shame. If you think you can take me now, then try. But I've blocked the only way out of here, so I'm afraid you are now in over your heads. Yugito's voice growled, before opened her maw with chakra beginning to collect between her teeth. Yamaton, Shinka no Konpaku, darkness style, ghost of the sacred flame, she yelled as a pair of spectral flames shot out of her mouth right at the pair. The two quickly dodged it with no problems, but noticed that the flames didn't extinguish afterwards. They landed on opposite sides of the room, each preparing in their own way to fight. Kazuku releasing his masks, while Hidden prepared his ritual symbol. I won't give you time to finish that. Yugito roared at Hidden before charging him. However, before she could get to him, two of the masks jumped in her way. The masks then, to both Yugito's digest and concern, merged together before their mouths opened, one of them releasing a large flame, while the other shot a gust of wind. The two attacks merged into one, which caused Yugito to jump. She had been able to get out of the way in time, which was lucky for her considering that the moment the jutsu hit the opposing wall it slammed right through it as if it wasn't even there. She is faster now, to be able to dodge Mai, Kaiten and Futen, Kadukain, fire and wind style, vortex flame, combination, Kazuku mused after seeing Yugito jump out of the way. Yugito's eyes narrowed at the increasingly dangerous men, before she raised a paw with her claws glowing black and swiped at him. Yamaton, Bachiatari no Fuzen, darkness style, sins of the damned. She roared as the growing claws flew through the air, screaming towards Kazuku. One of the same masks from before came between Yugito and her prey. It opened its mouth and shot a concentrated blast of wind at the incoming blades. The two attacks collided before the wind attack was able to throw the blades off target and slam harmlessly into the stone walls. Her lack of getting a single attack through made Yugito grunt in frustration. It's as if I'm facing 5 shinobi instead of just one. He can use any kind of elemental affinity he wishes to counteract anything I throw at him. She growled, trying to figure out what she should try next. Kitten, your assumption is right, but use that to your advantage. Try to maneuver yourself so that the mask that attacks you next will hit another mask when you dodge. Use his own strength against him. Azanami suggested. Yugito mentally nodded in understanding before she put the idea into action, and summoned another blast of Shinka no Yukai. As she predicted, Kazuku was able to deflect it with the wind mask, and counterattacked with another mask she recognized from before as the lightning. She quickly maneuvered herself so she was standing in front of the water mask, and just let the lightning mask attack. Yugito mentally smirked, and at the last moment jumped out of the way of the lightning strike. She turned her head to see if the plan worked and smiled slightly, seeing the jutsu about to hit the water mask. However, her smile faded when at the last moment the lightning veered off, right in her direction before striking her, making her roar in pain as the electricity passed through her. "You thought I'd let you destroy one of my own masks?" Kazuku questioned, as if you were genin. Kazuku stopped playing around with her. "My ritual to Jashin-sama is ready, so get me some of her blood." Hiden yelled over all the commotion. Kakazu spared a glance at Hiden, before his masks returned to his body, and he released a torrent of dark thread-like tendrils from his arms. "Jiongu, Earth Grudge Fear," he said, as the dark tendrils began to snake along the floor, before rising up and shooting themselves at Yugito. Yugito jumped out of the way of the tendrils, but with the hundreds of them rocketing at her she couldn't avoid them all, especially with her large size. She cursed, knowing what would happen. She landed with a loud thud, with her right hind leg wobbling under the pressure. "Seems I got you," Kazuku stated calmly. Yugito looked down and noticed that her leg was bleeding on both sides. "Damn, they didn't just stop when they hit me, they went through my whole leg," she realized, grunting in pain as the trails of blood flowed down her phantom-like appendage. "Jashin-sama thanks you," Hiden shouted with insane glee, as one of the tendrils sped her blood on sight, making Yugito look on in horror. Hiden smirked at both her expression as well as his own sadistic glee at what he was about to start. He licked the blood from the weapon and his skin changed one again. These guys are just too much. I need to get out of here. Yugito thought, disgusted with herself that she'd actually have to run away from a fight like some coward. She summoned all her remaining strength and shot towards the exit. "TSK Neko-chan, you know we won't let you escape," Hiden said with an insane chuckle. "Jujutsu, Shiji Hyokutsu, sorcery, death controller possessing blood," he called before slamming his scythe deeply into both his thighs, standing in his newly formed symbol. Yugito immediately felt the same SS in her own thighs and roared in pain. Her hind legs gave out, causing her to fall and skid on the ground, stopping only 10 yards from the doors. She began to drag herself along the ground with her claws towards the exit, leaving a heavy trail of blood behind her. However, after only a few attempts she collapsed on the ground, exhausted and feeling weak from blood loss. So much so that her transformation forcefully receded, leaving her stark end with bruises, gashes, and deep bleeding cuts all over her, the most prominent ones on her legs. "Hiden, cancel your jutsu, we need her alive," Kazuku ordered. "Kitten, I know you are tired, but you have to get away from these two men that are going to kill you if they get their hands on you, so please move," Azanami shouted worriedly, causing the blonde to stir with a groan. Her vision was slightly blurry, but she could still see the exit, and with all her remaining strength began to crawl once more to freedom. She was able to make it a few more yards, but was stopped when a hand grasped her ankle. No, Neko-chan, no escape for you," Hiden taunted, before pulling her towards him. He quickly grabbed the girl by the end of her arms, lifted her up and walked over to the locked door, with a smirking. He pulled one of her arms to the side and slammed a kunai into her palm, before doing the same to her other hand, crucifying her to the door. Her groan of pain sounded like a wounded puppy, her consciousness slipping in and out of her grasp. "You really do have one smockin' hot body there, Neko-chan. Although I must stay celibate, I can still give you a nice send-off before your life ends," he continued, letting his tongue lash over her dirtied and sweaty end, as a glint shined in his eye. "Oi Kazuku, look at this," he yelled, while holding up the odd three-pronged kunai he just picked up. "It's a rather strange kunai, don't you think?" he inquired, turning it at different angles trying to examine it. "And we've seen many strange weapons in our line of work. Stop wasting our time," he ordered, anger lacing his voice. "We have, but this kunai, it reminds me of something I once heard about dealing with a Kekkei Genkai. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember," the zealot answered, a look of frustration on his face. Kazuku grunted once more in annoyance, quickly turned to his partner, grabbed the kunai from his hand and turned to Yugito. He tilted her head up so her half-lidded eyes looked at both him and the kunai he waved in front of her. What is with this kunai? He questioned rather boredly, only wanting an answer to appease Hiden's annoying curiosity. Yugito's vision blurred in and out, but one of the times it cleared she recognized the special kunai that she had always kept on her persons no matter what. Her eyes widened slightly, as her focus cleared and looked at the kunai and all the memories it brought with it. Naruto-kun, she thought in a weary and lamenting way. Being in this situation caused her to look back at just how much he had changed her, and just how deeply her feelings had truly grown for him since they first met in that forest. Oi Neko-chan, we're talking to you, damn it. Hiden's voice kicked her out of her memories and back to the present. It was a gift, she rasped out. That's it. Is there anything special about it? He inquired, his tone urging her to spill everything about it that she knew. Just what it means to me, she answered back, her tea feeling dry. There you go, Hiden, nothing overly special about it. Probably a custom-made kunai from her boyfriend or something, he responded, looking back at the contemplating immortal. Kazuku waved the kunai in front of her tauntingly with the blade facing the ground, before letting it fall. Now, where were we? Hiden questioned maniacally. He leaned his face in with only inches separating them when the kunai struck the ground and a flash of orange light appeared, blinding all in the vicinity. Begin playing, Vestige by TM Revolution. You will not touch her again. An emotionless voice boomed, before a roar of gurgled pain sounded through the room. That voice. Yugito thought, her mind hazy from fighting the spell of unconscious that was placed on her. She focused her eyes as best she could at what had happened, only to dilate surprise at what she saw. Crouching right in front of her was another man wearing a dark orange flak jacket and black Junin attire. The back of his head adorned with unruly orange hair, with fox ears lying flat, usually a trait related to fear or extreme anger. 5 flowing orange fox tails squished about in front of her in an almost protective fashion, ready to strike down anyone who would dare come near her. Even with her mind as unclear as it was, could never in her life forget the only person that looked like that, and opened her mouth to say the person's name. Naruto-kun. She called, her voice hoarse and raspy, part of her fearing that it was only an illusion and he would disappear the moment she called out to him. You will pay for the pain you have caused her. He promised, as his katana, which she had just now noticed, sunk even deeper into the chest of Hiden, causing him to spit up blood. Hiden, Kakazu shouted in surprise, his eyes finally adjusting to the orange flash that had occurred, only to see his partner hunched slightly over with a katana protruding out of his back. Just who the hell are you? Hiden rasped out as dribbles of blood fell from the corners of his mouth. Naruto's answer was to push off his bent legs, causing Shinku Kaijin to delve completely into the man's chest up to the hilt, while propelling him backward and Naruto forward. As Hiden continued back, Naruto took a hard step forward and stopping his momentum, causing the sword to slide out of the strange man. However, in the second this happened, Naruto had twisted the sword to the left, now holding it sideways, before he slashed in the same direction, spinning the blade out of the man in a sideways slash completely through the man's chest. A wave of blood flew through the air as the sword arced through it before resting at Naruto's side. Hiden was sent torpedoing at Kakazu, who had no time to react and was hit by the immortal man. Naruto stood up straight and tall, his back still to the injured woman as his tails flailed about, expressing the anger that his body refused to. Rivers of blood drained down the edge of the sword, drops of blood fell littering the ground with the crimson liquid, as the blade itself seemed to hum in satisfaction. Yugito-chan. Naruto's voice called out to her, still holding the malice from before, making her flinch and slightly fearful of answering, even though they were friends. Hi, she rasped out. Rest now, Yugito-chan, but do not fall asleep. Promise me you will stay awake. His voice now warm and comforting and slightly pleading, compared to the tone it held only a moment before. Her eyes widened slightly as his request, but understood that he was simply concerned for her life. He had probably noticed how badly hurt she was, and was just worried about her. I promise. The ends of her lips curled up into a brief smile, happy that he kept his word at being there for her whenever she needed him. The two cloaked men were able to recover from the surprise attack, while the Jinchuriki talked and were now standing side by side. They both looked annoyed at the intruder of their mission, though Kakazu only looked annoyed at the newcomer, while Hiden was livid as Kakazu patched up his chest using his tendrils. You ruined my fun, so in return I'll you to Jashin-sama. Hiden growled out. Hiden, we are here for the girl, remember Leader Sama's orders. You can play with whoever he is after she is in our custody. Kakazu scolded his irate partner. Hiden clenched his teeth, knowing his partner was right. Fine. Just get me his blood so we can get him out of the way and get what we came for. He grumbled. Kakazu nodded, and let his 4 masks come back to life, ready to fight once more. Naruto's only response was to their actions was to raise his sword in the basic style of Kitsune Isei Ryu. Kazuku wasted no time in attack, sending his lightning mask forward, its mouth opening before an electrical surge collected and shot off at Naruto. Naruto used his speed to dodge the bolt, but was surprised when it turned and headed right towards him again. My masks have absolute control over the elements. That lightning will follow you until oblivion because it's following your chakra signature. Kakazu explained. Naruto ran around the room with the lightning bolt on his trail. No matter how swift his twists and turns, he just couldn't lose the jutsu that followed him. Guess I have no choice, Naruto concluded, before turning in midair, and skidded backwards to a stop, striking the ground with Shinku Kaijin as he did. It wasn't long until the jutsu struck Naruto, making him growl in pain, which caused Hiden to sadistically laugh. That is until he noticed Naruto wasn't turning into a charred corpse like all of Kakazu's other victims did. The jutsu soon receded, leaving a smoldering, but mostly unhurt Naruto, but before he took out the sword from the ground, and disappeared a small dust cloud in the air from where he was just standing. Kakazu's eyes narrowed at losing track of his enemy, before feeling a breeze behind him and a pain to shoot nearly an inch into his end before stopping at the sound of metal clashing against metal. Kazuku looked in the direction of the pain, and saw Naruto's blade in the corner of his eye, before they went slightly wide at the implications. Whoever this man is, he isn't joking around. He is going for a finishing blow early on and without mercy, and worse yet, he seems to have the skill to accomplish it. He thought, feeling blood drain from his Gamen, but I cannot allow you to K him, no matter how stuck up he is. Leader Sama would not be pleased upon hearing his defeat. Hiden stated matter-of-factly, a long chain-linked scythe extending from his 2 hands. He stopped the strike with his scythe. I guess I owe him one, Kazuku conceded, realizing why Naruto had stopped his attack. The 2 weapon users stared each other down, before Hiden flicked his wrist, making the scythe screech down Naruto's blade faster than the Hanyu thought possible from the sheer size and probable weight of the weapon. Naruto drew back his own blade from within his opponent's and jumped back from the scythe's strike. Unfortunately, it nicked him in the arm, making Hiden smirk at the implications. He landed quietly and checked the wound for any sly poison, and when finding none, just let his healing ability close the wound, never noticing that it didn't closing. This battle is over. However, I would like that sword first, if you would, Hiden, Kakazu called, making Hiden smirk in approval before jumping back into the ritual marking he had used on Yugito. Yugito had watched the fight with blurred vision, and thought Naruto could win against the 2 with how he was fighting. But the moment she saw Hiden activate that same ritual he used on her twice before, her blood to run cold and fear to creep into her. She had to warn him about what that jutsu could do. Naruto-kun. She rasped out, her tea completely dry, causing her voice to only come out as a harsh whisper that Naruto had heard but wasn't able to reply to when Hiden's voice echoed throughout the chamber. Jujutsu, Shiji Hyokutsu, sorcery, death controller possessing blood. His skin once again turned black as the familiar exoskeleton appeared on top of his skin. Naruto just looked on in curiosity, before he saw Hiden plunge his scythe into his own right arm. Naruto's right arm, which held Shinku Kaijin, violently twitched as the pain was transferred to it, causing his grip to slightly shake but not let go. Naruto's expression hadn't changed, and just looked at his reacting arm in morbid curiosity. The pair looked rather perturbed at Naruto's reaction. No one had before reacted as little as Naruto had when Hiden used this jutsu. Not even a grimace of pain crossed his face. That is a very interesting jutsu you have. Hiden, was it? Naruto asked, not expecting an answer. However, if you expected that to stop me, you are sorely mistaken. I have taken far worse in my home, so you'll have to do better than that. He stated while slicing his thumb along his blade's edge. However, you will not have the opportunity to again. Hake, Shinku Kaijin, release, Crimson Ash. Naruto shouted, as he swung his katana in a wide horizontal arc. End song. The two men weren't worried when they saw Naruto swing his sword towards them. However, that all changed when the blade itself burst into flame, shooting out towards them at an unbelievable velocity in the same arc motion. The pair had no time to react from the sheer shock at what they witnessed. Even if they did, they doubted they'd be able to escape such an attack without being severely injured in the process, if they even survived. Well, for Kazuku anyway. Hidden though would survive wouldn't mean he was any less shocked that such an attack from a weapon could exist, nor admit that being hit by it wouldn't hurt like hell. The flames were nearly upon him, when an explosion rocked in the far wall. And from the dust shot black flames which trailed in between the pair of men and Naruto's flames. The two flame attacks collided in a stalemate of power, the flames twisting and turning within each other trying to engulf the other and absorb its strength, but no matter how much they struggled they were completely S-locked. Soon however both flames SD down from their caster's call. When the flames completely receded, and the smoldering earth stopped steaming, Naruto saw two people he recognized immediately. Itachi, he growled out. Naruto-kun, you look, well. ... The emotionless Uchiha stated, not quite knowing the word to describe Naruto's new look. Ah, this must be what you really look like. I've been wondering ever since I saw that genjutsu over you in Wave. At first I thought that's what it was, but I dismissed it off since you seemed far too young, but apparently I was wrong. I'm also interested to know what kind of genjutsu that was, since not even my Kekkei Genkai could penetrate it. He commented offhandedly. Itachi, kiss him, what are you two doing here? Hiden asked, slightly angered that these two would show up like this. Saving your lives apparently, Kisame said, eyeing Naruto, but even more so his still flaming sword with a glint of interest in his fish-like eyes. What do you mean? We had him perfectly well before you two showed up. You know that Kazuku can't test that easily, or me ever. Hiden stated, wanting to get some answers as the intrusion. You seem to not realize who he is despite his name. Itachi answered, his Sharingan swirling. This is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, he stated flatly. Naruto's two first opponents looked back at him with arched brows. So we were fighting your target this whole time? Kakazu questioned, only getting the slightest of nods from Itachi. What is the big deal then? The four of us can handle him easily enough and then we'd have two captured instead of just one. Hiden stated, only to see Itachi shake his head. You all know as well as I do what happens to Jinchuriki who hold demons with the power of 5 tails or more. He spanned, while pointing at Naruto. And it seems Naruto has already gone through his sosei with Kyuubi. Meaning those tails aren't just for intimidation anymore. He concluded, making the immortals look at Naruto in a new light, before Hiden gawked slightly. He has 5 of its tails, he said almost unbelievingly. Correct, and from what my Sharingan is telling me, you both have been fighting him at only his normal chakra output. He hadn't even decided to use any boost from his tails in the fight. But with all 4 of us we could beat him anyway, so his tails won't matter. Hiden said, while subconsciously rubbing the slash mark on his chest, wondering how that situation would have ended had Naruto used all his power in the strike. That would be a gamble at best. Hiden. The Kyuubi was the strongest of all the demons. Its tails were immensely more powerful than the other Bijus. The power difference between Nibi's 2 tails and Kyuubi's could be astronomical. Not only that, but we don't know many of his skills, nor are either of you at a level to fight him equally if he does release his power anymore. There are too many variables to consider with him. Especially with that legendary blade by his side. Forged from Kyuubi itself. ... Single quote. Shinku Kaijin. Itachi tried to explain their situation as bluntly as possible, making Kisame look astounded at hearing the name of that legendary blade, a blade in which anyone who calls themselves a swordsman knows. Itachi felt another chakra signature, albeit a weak one, and looked over at Yugito. We will retreat for now, however Nibi will still be our consolation prize. He reassured them, before shunshing towards Yugito, intent on not leaving the mission empty-handed. When Itachi phased in front of her, his eyes ever so slightly darkened at who he saw right in front of his face. A cold steel blade was pressed hard against his teeth. If he moved at all he would be So, you somehow were able to learn the Yondaim's Kekkei Genkai. Itachi said almost nonchalantly, Naruto's cold amethyst gaze unwavering into his opponent's red. Your silence tells me I'm right. Not that you really had to, since I know that the Hiraishin is one of the few jutsu in known existence that my eyes can't follow despite it being chakra-based. He stated as if the two were having a normal conversation in a restaurant. Itachi. Naruto's voice was cold, colder than even his. Quote. I've already warned you and your partner of what would happen should either of you try to hurt someone I care about. And not even the fact that I want to shake your hand for destroying that dishonorable can once called Uchiha, will stop me from going through with my promise. He said with finality, pressing the blade even deeper, slightly constricting Itachi's windpipe. Leave. Now. If you do, I will let you fall live. If not, I will KO you without any more hesitation. Naruto finished, his ultimatum on the table with the ball, now in Itachi's court. The two men stared at each other for what seemed to be eternity, before Itachi's eyes turned back to their coal-colored black. He took a step back from Naruto's blade, and shunshuned next to kiss him. Naruto's guard didn't falter an inch, and just stared at the four. We will leave, Itachi commanded, the three others looking at him in slight surprise. We can collect her later. He explained, feeling the gazes on him silently asking for an explanation. Itachi, Naruto called out from the opposite side of the chamber. She is under my protection as is Shukaku, should any of you hunt either of them again. No quarter will be given and I will not hold back. He continued before releasing 3 taels worth of ki upon the chamber, forcing both Hiden and Kazuku to falter a knee while kiss him, and Itachi's legs began to buckle from the pressure. Quote. And whomever it is will s. Naruto's voice was completely otherworldly and demonic, as if Naruto was the reincarnation of Kyuubi itself, and just as quickly as the pressure came, it left, releasing the men from its GS. Itachi's Sharingan activated again in surprise, the Tomo spinning wildly as he looked as the now stoic Jinchuriki. To think that a boy could hold such great power in so little time, and to even cause my body to react in such a way to Ki. He will truly be a worthy opponent to test myself against if the time comes, however I will need to refine my skills some. Akatsuki's mission has dulled my strength compared to how I was back in Anbu. The Uchiha prodigy thought. I understand, Naruto-kun. I will let Leader Sama know of your declaration. Until we see each other again. He agreed, raising his hand signaling for them to leave, which they did in their various shunshin styles. Oh, good luck healing you and Nibby from my poison. Here's a hint, medical chakra won't work. Hiden's voice called out, his tone smug and sadistically playful before disappearing into the wind. Once Naruto's senses told him they were far enough away, he unsummoned Shinku Kaijin and turned towards Yugito. His expression turned to worry and fear at seeing her head hanging limply down, her body still crucified to the door, her legs and right arm completely red with her blood. He rushed to her aid and as carefully as he could sped the blood-coated kunai out of her palms. He carefully scooping her up in his arms and sat down Indian style with her ghostly white and blue body DRD across his lap, allowing her head to rest against his arm. Naruto quickly looked her up and down to assess her injuries, not even registering she was stark N. Damn, he wasn't kidding, that poison is affecting our healing abilities. He cursed, noticing that the wounds on his arm had failed to heal. Quote. I need to stop the bleeding first. He said medical chakra wouldn't work, but he never mentioned Onoppo Jutsu. Naruto conversed with himself, the idea came to him. With the greatest of care he placed Pale Woman on the ground before grabbing medical gauze from his pouch. He wrapped the gauze around his right hand, before going through a set of seals with his left. Onoppo, Suba Fukatsu, Demon Art, Saliva Restoration. He said, before pressing the hand on the large S across her right thigh, letting the gauze soak up as much of the blood as it could. Naruto bent down and slowly DRD his chakra-enhanced tongue along the wound slowly, his hand moving at the same speed as the gauze so that no blood could escape while he used the jutsu. When he finished with the wound he smiled lightly, seeing the small amount of blood on top of the wound sizzle, dissolving all of the bacteria that accumulated in the wound from the dirt she dragged herself on and Hiden's poison. Once he saw the blood stop sizzling, and her wound already beginning to close from his saliva, he moved onto her left thigh. He followed the same procedure, though this time noting that her body shivered, and a low gurgled M escaped her T. I really need to find a new way to administer this jutsu, cause I'll be damned if I do this for a male, he thought mentally, shaking his head, while sighing at the fact he began to smell Yugito's body unconsciously give off pheromones. Well, at least she is unconscious. I doubt she's want me to do something like this if she was awake. He finished, slightly chuckling at imagining her reaction. Oh, just how wrong he was. Naruto successfully healed her legs, before doing the same for the cut on her right arm as well. Once he finished with the hard stuff, he pulled her back on his lap. He concentrated then, before Yugito's body slightly glowed purple. I certainly don't envy medical shinobi. It's no wonder why they need such great chakra control, he mumbled offhandedly, his brow stained with sweat, as the aura around the woman in his arms dimmed before disappearing completely, leaving a much cleaner looking Yugito, though her skin tone was still a ghostly pale. Now I just need to get her up. Azanami-san, if you can hear me, I could use some help, he requested. Naruto adjusted her in his lap, before slightly shaking her, hoping that she would wake up with his motions and her prisoner's words. He continued his motions for a good minute before feeling her body move, turning towards him, snuggling into him. Yugito-chan, wake up, he called, warm but firmly. The young woman weaseled around slightly in annoyance before turning her head towards the voice with her eyes fluttering open. Naruto-kun? She questioned, her voice raspy and only loud enough to be a whisper. Truth be told, the poor woman was finding it very difficult to focus clearly and only saw blotches of shapes, but Naruto's form was rather recognizable even in that state. He sighed in relief. Hey, welcome back, he greeted with a happy smile. In response, she weakly brought up her left arm and cupped his whiskered cheek with her hand, thumbing his birthmarks tenderly, which made Naruto's body shiver and a low to gurgle in his tea as a pink tinge graced his cheeks. Naruto wouldn't ever tell anyone, but ever since his sosei, both his whisker marks and tails had become hypersensitive, and even more so as time went by of him being a Hanyu. By now they were so sensitive that Natsumi, who was the only one who knew about it, considered them two of his erogenous zones. Although a harsh touch wouldn't do anything but piss him off, a gentle enough caress of his whiskers or tails, and his entire body would heat up from the type of contact. Which unfortunately for him was exactly what Yugito was currently doing to him, even though she had no idea. Arigato, it was very kind of you to appear before me as Naruto-kun, it makes it a bit more easy to take. Tenshi-kun, she thanked warmly, her lips curling into a happy and appreciative smile. Angel, Naruto mentally questioned at hearing her address him as such. Kami-sama, she thinks she SD. He figured out, slight shock appearing on his face. Yugito-ch. He started before being interrupted by her hand moving to the back of his pulling his face to only millimeters apart. Their noses barely touching, each looking into the other's eyes. Let me just give you my thanks for such a kind gesture, Tenshi-kun, onagai. She pleaded cutely, her voice, though slightly sad at the situation she thought she was in, still held warmth and happiness in it before pulling him down the last inch and pressed their lips together in a passionate kiss. Naruto at first freaked out at her actions, considering what they both just went through. An intimate moment wasn't what he thought would occur. Unfortunately, from her caresses moments before, his rational brain functions had shut down for now, and all his current thoughts were concentrated on the soft and oddly warm lips, along with the curvaceous body in his arms they were connected to. The kiss to him seemed to express many strong emotions that Yugito currently held. Sadness, fear, happiness, regret, love. He knew he would have to explain the situation to her, but at the moment didn't want to disappoint her with what she thought was really happening, and allowed himself to kiss her back. He squeezed her body gently against him, making her in both happiness and contentment. The kiss lasted a few moments longer before the two split apart, lightly panting, each with a slight blush on their cheeks. You taste sweet. I wonder if that's how Naruto-kun would have tasted. She questioned more to herself than him, with a small giggle, making him arch a brow in interest. Arigato, Tenshi-kun. I'm ready now, she stated, her voice just above a whisper now, her words giving him all the meaning he needed, if he was truly an angel, that is. Naruto couldn't help but smile and chuckle lightly at the woman in his arms, before flicking the tip of her nose playfully with a finger. Any Yugito-chan, what I was going to say before you kissed me was that you aren't You fell unconscious from blood loss, but I was able to heal your wounds. And with Izanami-san's help was able to wake you up. Though it wasn't for the reason that just happened, even if it was a great kiss. He explained, a warm and slightly devilish smile on his lips, simply waiting for the woman to figure it out. Yugito just looked at him oddly, her head tilting to the side, making her look rather cute. What does he mean I'm not S? She mentally questioned. When I fell unconscious I felt so weak. But when I awoke I felt so much better. Quote. She explained as if he could hear her. But then if he is an angel, what reason would he have to lie to me? What would he gain by doing so? Unless he really isn't an angel. And if that were the case then I'd just, oh, my. Kami-sama. She finished as all her thoughts lead to one conclusion, that she really was still alive. And just said all those things to the only guy she'd ever had feelings for, and to top it off just kissed him. Bingo. Azanami's voice roared in Yugito's mind, before she finally couldn't hold it anymore and burst out laughing. Oh, Kami-sama kitten laugh, that whole scene laugh was priceless. Laugh, she roared while rolling on the floor of her cage holding her sides to keep from busting a rib. You know laugh, I'm never going to laugh, let you live this laugh down right. She questioned, still on the floor. Yugito was still too surprised to answer the demoness in her head, her facial expression showing the same shock her mind had at the realization. Naruto could only snicker slightly at the poor woman's expense. He soon grew slightly concerned when after a few minutes she hadn't moved. He lightly shook, getting her attention back onto the topic at hand. Any Yugito-chan, are you alright? You finally believe you're still quite alive? He questioned softly. Yugito didn't have the courage to trust her voice at the moment, and just nodded her head in affirmation before turning her face into his stomach in a childish attempt to hide herself, wishing she could just vanish. Naruto chuckled slightly, but also felt sympathy with how things ended up for her. He mentally admitted that if he were in her position back when he was scarred to tell Natsumi his feelings for her, he probably would have ended up in a similar situation as this. He squeezed her body gently to give her a signal that he wanted her attention, which worked when he saw her turn her head. Yugito-chan, we can talk about it later ne. But I woke you up because I need you to give you a transfusion. You lost a large amount of blood and need to get it replenished some before I can get you to a hospital. I don't want you falling sleeping again until that done, you promised me, remember? He questioned with a very weak stern look, making her look down in slight shame at not keeping such a simple promise. Gomen, she answered lowly. He frowned at her reaction, and leaned down to give her temple a reassuring chaste kiss. It's not a problem, Yugito-chan. I'm just glad you are all right. You had me really worried, I thought I lost you for a while there. He replied warmly, the tone and smile he gave her making her expression soften, and body to relax. Arigato for saving me, Naruto-kun, she responded, her eyes looking back at him. You aren't out of the woods yet, Neko-chan, he teased, his smile growing, making her smile slightly in response. With the situation now calmer, Naruto's vision started picking up the fact the woman in his arms was still completely in. He turned his head swiftly to the side with a small blush, his motions making Yugito tilt her head in confusion. He was a gentleman after all, and unless given permission wouldn't ogle a woman's body unless it was Hana or Natsumi. Yugito-chan, gomen, but in my haste I completely forgot until now that you lost your clothes. And unfortunately I wasn't expecting a fight when I felt the Haraishin kunai, so I didn't bring an extra set. He apologized. Yugito's face flushed red at the implications of what he just said. This really was just not her day. She squirmed slightly in his GS, to try to get his attention while using her arms to hide her assets. Naruto hesitated a moment before looking back at the still blushing woman, before thinking a moment and thought of an idea. Without a moment's hesitation he switched his grip on the woman and then pulled her from his lap, causing a small eep from her, and then sat her back down upright, her front facing away from him. I thought maybe you'd be more comfortable like this, he explained, getting a slight nod in both affirmation and appreciation. Hold on one more second, he commanded, before Yugito heard a zipper and then clothing shuffle around. Here, I know it's not much, but it's better than what was left of your clothes. He finished before a black shirt went over her head. Yugito was surprised at what he did, but was thankful for the slight emotional protection it served from her embarrassment as well as warmth. Arigato, Naruto-kun, she said while sliding her arms into the short sleeves. Not a problem, just sorry I don't have bottoms. He apologized. You ready? He questioned, and got a nod. Naruto nodded back before grabbing a kunai from his pouch and put his arms around Yugito his wrist and the kunai in front of her. He quickly his wrist, a few quick drops of blood fell to the ground. Drink, he commanded softly. Yugito was still slightly apprehensive, she may have had a demon inside her but she never found the taste of blood appealing. And in fact found the taste appalling the few times he had it. So Izanami's bloodthirst tended to be wasted on her, much to the dismay of the demoness. But she knew that Naruto was only trying to help her out, and decided she would listen. She grabbed his hand and forearm in both her own, bringing the bleeding wrist to only tongue's length away. She lightly flicked her tongue across the red liquid in a form of taste testing, and was surprised that his blood didn't taste anything like what she had expected. It's sweet, she noted, the cringe on her face at the prospect of drinking blood relaxed, and actually changing to a slightly pleasant one. His blood still held the coppery taste that all blood seemed to, but his also had a hint of sweetness to it that made his blood palatable to her. She gathered it was because Naruto was a Hanyu, and demon blood may just taste different. She got over her hesitation quickly and with more reverence placed her entire mouth over the bleeding wrist, before she began lapping up the stream of blood in a slightly enjoyable way, though not as enjoyable as Anko when she was in the same position a few weeks earlier, at least to Naruto. Yugito became so relaxed at what she was doing she actually fell back lightly thumping against Naruto's chest while continuing her ministration on his wrist. Lucky, Izanami whined, her tone almost making the demoness's disappointing and jealous pout visible to the Jinchuriki. Naruto allowed the transfusion to go on another 10 minutes before he told her it was enough. She let his wrist go, though Naruto heard the slightest of whimpers from her at having to, making him silently chuckle. It seems his blood had quite the effect on the opposite gender. I could probably use that with Natsu-chan later, he thought with a smirk. Okay Yugito-chan, you should be alright until we can get you proper medical treatment, so let's gather what's left of your things and head out NE. He questioned, getting a nod from her. She sat up slightly, so he could move because with the shirt only reaching her hips she didn't want to give him an accidental show if she stood up from his lap with his face right there after all. The two looked around and only found his Hiraishin kunai and the purple scroll for Izanami's body. Not much left I guess Yugito-chan. Let's get you back to Kumo, he suggested, his tone growing harsh when he said her home, as his head swiveled around looking for anything they might have missed. Yugito grunted in response, the prospect of going back there not appealing to her in the least but knew she had to. She turned the corner of one of the fallen columns that lined the battered chamber to meet back with Naruto to only stop in her tracks when she saw him again considering they began their search immediately after getting up. Kami-sama out off Kami-sama, both she and Izanami said breathlessly at once. Since Naruto had given her his only shirt the only thing that covered his torso now was his dark orange flak jacket that was still unzipped and opened, which greatly showed off his chiseled stomach, toned chest, and strong arms. Both females just gaped at him while he continued with his final sweep of the chamber. That amount of sinis should to be illegal. Izanami said, her tone already filling with lust and want. Kitten, can you let me out, just for 10 minutes? Please, she asked her friend, her voice pleading to get out. Gomen Izanami-chan, but after what's happened I don't think he is up for anything like that, Yugito answered, while the little voice in her own mind was pleading for the same thing. Just 10 minutes. Quote, well at least now I have some blackmail on you Izanami-chan. Because I wonder what Natsumi-san would say about what you are doing to the thought of her mate. Yugito said, her voice half lustful from Naruto, and half smug from getting revenge on her friend, who only grunted in response before Yugito couldn't hear her anymore. Yugito-chan. Naruto called out, making her blink several times. You spaced out on me, you okay? He questioned, concern evident in his voice. Yugito quickly looked away in embarrassment, before nodding. Hi, Gomen. Izanami-chan wanted to talk to me. She explained, only telling the half-truth, before looking back at him and noticing something odd. Naruto-kun, why is your headband over your eyes? Quote, it had been a good 5 minutes while zooming thought the mountains, most of which were only splotches of brown and gray from the speeds they were going. The pair had been completely silent since they were off, and it was driving Yugito nuts. Mainly because she was still embarrassed about what she had said and done, and what made it that much worse was that Naruto hadn't spoken a word about it yet. In truth, she had hoped he'd ask her about it, she so wouldn't have to be the one to initiate the conversation, but seemed that Naruto wasn't going to. So with an audible gulp decided to lay it all on the line and moved her mouth next to his ear so he could hear her. Naruto-kun. Hi. About what I said and did. It's okay, Yugito-chan. I understand. He interrupted reassuringly, unknowingly saving a little bit of her dignity by not having to say it. So you know that you like me. Hi. What you did back there showed me, he interrupted again. Unfortunately, I don't quite feel the same way about you. I see. It was now her time to interrupt him, especially since she didn't nor want to hear any more. Yugito's her heart sank as her expression saddened immediately after hearing him. Her limbs and muscles slightly gave out at knowing the only man she ever had feels for didn't return them. Not that she could really blame him, when you already have two very attractive women by your side such as Hana and Natsumi, why would you need another? She could hear Izanami in the back of her mind cursing the man she was riding on, wanting only 10 minutes with him now to tear him to pieces for hurting her. She sunk her head back down to his shoulder, wishing she was anywhere but with him, while tears threatened to fall from the corners of her eyes. Her face scrunched into one of utter self-loathing and anger. I'm a Kumo Kunoiki, not only that but I'm one of the best the village has for Kami's sake. I shouldn't be so emotionally weak. She mentally screamed at herself, feeling her tears becoming harder and harder to hold back, with her teeth clenched tightly. And yet, I can't help but feel sad, and alone. I know he doesn't want me to feel bad since he is my friend, just because he doesn't have those kinds of feelings that I do for him but it still hurts, so much. She thought, as her already fragile emotional defenses finally broken hot, salty tears fell down her cheeks. Yugito was a few seconds away from a quiet sob escaping her, when she felt a head lean back and press against hers, and the hands holding her thighs squeeze gently to get her attention. Yugito-chan, you really should have left me finish before you jumped to the very conclusion that is making you sad and cry. He stated, his tone was strong and cut through the billowing winds easily, while also being warm and comforting. What I was going to say is that, while I don't have those same feelings for you right now, that doesn't mean I won't develop some later. I mean for Kami-sama's sake, you're beautiful, smart, strong, caring, and a good person. I would be a complete fool to not notice those things about you. He reassured, his words shocking the kunoiki on his back, and making her blush at his description about her. So I don't want you to think that it's because you aren't attractive to me or I won't ever like you in that way. Truth be told, that is probably the farthest thing from the truth. But because of the Chunin exams and the invasion, I can't really be thinking about that kind of stuff. And the only reason Hana-chan and I are as close as we are is because we had a past prior to me returning and our feelings apparently grew over the years. Had we not, I probably would have told her the same thing I just told you. He explained before sighing. I hope you aren't too upset with me, but I promise that if after the invasion is over and done with, and while getting to know you better as friends I begin to develop feelings for you, we'll just see where things lead, okay? Until that time let's just continue to be good friends, Yugito-chan? He asked, nuzzling her head slightly in a reassuring fashion. Yugito for her own part just listened intently to Naruto's explanation, and while listening became slightly embarrassed at her childish way of acting on her emotions. There was a major invasion that was going to occur in a few weeks and she was trying to get Naruto to notice her, when he had much bigger and important things to think about. She listened to the rest of his words just as intently, and her tears of loathing soon grew to tears of happiness that he wasn't actually writing her off like it first sounded. He was simply postponing the sheer possibility something may happen for a later and less chaotic time. Once he finished his explanation, and she felt him nuzzle against her, a wide grin was placed on her lips before she slightly nuzzled back, telling him she understood and agreed. Arigato Yugito-chan, he whispered after feeling her response. Although I hope you know that if anything does happen, you should be prepared for a talk from Hana-chan, and Natsu-chan. They are rather protective of me, as you've seen. Plus they hate sharing. He joked, shaking his head. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.